Yesterday's hardware unboxed video that had the title and thumbnail about the 5070 Ti being killed off by Nvidia certainly sparked a huge cascade of events, issuing multiple statements from Asus, which contradict other ones, and then Nvidia making some statements. And after that video had originally been posted and has now been updated to have a new title and thumbnail, Schrodinger's 5070 Ti end of life or not, and that there's an update, and that update is available in that comment section as well as the Hardware Unboxed Twitter account. We also had Jay's 2 cents getting into all of this immediately after the Hardware Unboxed video, and then he has also posted some clarification since then as well. I did a video yesterday, and I want to be clear, in my video I was actually mostly focused on the information that the supply would be focused on certain models, but I was very careful not to say that any models would be for sure completely killed off. And again, people reading into certain titles and thumbnails may have got a different picture than if you actually watched what was said in the various videos. Also, we have outlets like WCCF Tech who have reached out to all of their sources within the AIB partners, NVIDIA themselves, to try to get to the bottom of what is going on with the memory situation. And they're claiming that NVIDIA is actually absorbing some of the increased memory costs to protect gamers, for now at least, which is interesting. And in this video, I've also tried to find out if we know any additional information about what's happening with AMD. All of my sources will be linked in the video description. So let's go ahead and look at what is all of the current information. So I think we should start with Hardware Unboxed's latest post trying to clarify what happened from their end and what they've been updated about since then. They say, sorry everyone, but we've just provided another clarifying statement from Asus. And if we get down to it, here's the timeline of events. So this is because again, I think it's really the Hardware Unboxed video that sparked the responses and clarifications from NVIDIA and Asus. So this is Hardware Unboxed speaking, request 5070 Ti samples from Asus and other partners. An Asus PR rep looks into it, comes back and says they cannot provide 5070 Ti's due to supply constraints, saying their models are end of life. This is where Hardware Unboxed got that wording, the end-of-life wording. They're saying it's a direct quote from an Asus PR rep. And they said that before posting their video, they asked Asus to clarify whether the 5070 Ti is end-of-life, and they confirm that it's end-of-life. So then Hardware Unboxed reach out to retailers to see whether they can purchase 5070 Ti stock for their stores to fact-check Asus's claim. Again, this is before they published their video. And they say there is no supply. So given that they have received an on-the-record statement from Asus and confirmed the supply constraints with retailers, they then published the video that set off the firestorm. So again, it does look like they did a lot of due diligence to confirm that that was the situation prior to posting that video. However, after that video was posted and again followed up on by other big outlets like Jay's 2 cents, NVIDIA had made a statement saying that, wait, all GeForce SKUs are being shipped. The direct quote on that is, do they not include it here? I know I've got it in other statements here, so I've got it at least in this one. So the official statement from NVIDIA, given the same exact statement has been given to multiple media outlets. This is from WCCF Tech, but I also saw it at Hardware Lux and others. I think it's the same quote they gave to Jay's 2 cents. NVIDIA's quote is, demand for GeForce RTX GPUs is strong and memory supply is constrained. We continue to ship all GeForce SKUs and are working closely with our suppliers to maximize memory availability. Now, it is important when you read this to notice that they in no way are saying that they're shipping tons of 5070 Ti's or that 5070 Ti's are going to be anywhere near as available as they were. In fact, they are mentioning that they are having to work with suppliers to try to maximize memory availability, even though it is constrained. So, in other words, they are confirming that they are continuing to ship all GeForce SKUs, meaning some 5070 Ti's are being shipped, but the quantity is not specified. Now, remember that a lot of what I was talking about in my last video was actually based more on a leak from HKEPC, who was again citing insider sources with board partners, etc., where what they had said isn't that models were being killed off. It was that the VRAM allocations are being directed towards certain models. So in other words, if the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, the 5070 Ti, which has 16 gigabyte, and the 5080 also has 16 gigabyte, Nvidia has limited amounts of 16 gigabytes to work with. If they make more 5080s available with that, then they can preserve higher margins, higher profit, and then they're not saying that none of these others will be produced necessarily, but they're not the main focus. Same thing on the 8 gigabyte side. This leak had said that the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte would be prioritized among the 8 gigabyte cards, again, likely because there's more money to be made there. So that statement, to be clear, is in no way contradicted by what Nvidia is saying here. Also, remember that the Hardware Unboxed video, although the title and thumbnail was along the lines of Nvidia killed off the 5070 Ti, in the video itself, it was clear that they weren't saying that Nvidia wasn't producing any, it's just that it wasn't in enough quantity for Asus to continue manufacturing those models. And that is where some of the additional clarifications come in now. All right, so Nvidia clarifies all SKUs are being shipped. Again, if you read the statement, it doesn't say in what quantity or if models are being prioritized, which is what I think is happening behind the scenes. Anyway, so Asus reaches out to clarify that Nvidia told Asus that the RTX 5070 Ti is not end of life, but that Asus are streamlining some models. So that is basically saying the 5070 Ti isn't end of life, but by streamlining some models, in other words, this again to me sounds like exactly what I was seeing here, which is some models are not getting a lot of production. So, they're streamlining the focus on the higher margin products in each memory capacity line. That's what that sounds like to me. And then Hardware Unboxed had published that statement once it was available. Now, Asus has reached out again to provide another statement, and now saying that the 5070 Ti is not discontinued or end of life. This directly contradicts the original statement. So then basically Asus is saying that even Asus will still continue making 5070 Ti products. So that is a direct contradiction of what was originally stated in the Hardware Unboxed video, but it's also because it's contradicting what Hardware Unboxed was originally told by some Asus representative. So now Hardware Unboxed has requested 5070 Ti samples, since apparently they're not discontinued, but haven't heard back yet. So we'll see if Hardware Unboxed does an updated video at some point. I know that I think Jay's 2 Cents has done an updated response to his video. But also, we have an actual just public press release from Asus regarding this matter now, so we could take a look at that. And again, all my sources will be linked in the video description. So, public statement to clarify recent reports regarding the Asus GeForce RTX 5070 Ti and RTX 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. So this is what Asus is making as their public statement. We would like to clarify recent reports regarding the Asus GeForce RTX 5070 Ti and RTX 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Certain media may have received incomplete information from an Asus PR representative regarding these products. So basically they're saying that Hardware Unboxed is the certain media, maybe there's others, and they're saying that they received incomplete information. So what is the official information then? The RTX 5070 Ti and RTX 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte have not been discontinued or designated as end of life. Asus has no plans to stop selling these models. Again, that is a direct contradiction of what Hardware Unboxed claims to have been told in that direct wording from their representative. Interesting. Current fluctuations in supply for both products are primarily due to memory supply constraints. So this is important to read because it is stating that there are current fluctuations in supply for both products that are due primarily to memory supply constraints, which have temporarily affected production output and restocking cycles. In other words, they're directly acknowledging that there is less supply of those products primarily due to memory supply constraints, and that this has impacted production output and restocking. In other words, when you go out and look on the market and there's not a lot of 5070 Ti's right now, that's because that's a real thing that happened because of the memory issue, right? They're saying that right here. And they're saying, as a result, availability may appear limited in certain markets. They're not saying it may appear limited, but they're also saying, like, it is literally limited. So anyway, and they're saying in certain markets, so it's possible that certain regions are more affected than others. But they are saying that this should not be interpreted as a production halt or product retirement. In other words, I think what makes sense out of all of this is what happened is, again, exactly what I was focusing on in my previous video. There is limited memory supply. So certain models are being produced less, which isn't the same thing as not at all. Certain other products are getting a larger quantity of whatever memory supply is available. That seems to be what is happening here, and none of that is contradicted by this public statement. So it's possible that Asus internally had maybe been using looser wording on this. Maybe temporarily they stopped production. It felt like an end of life, at least temporarily. But the idea was that it could start back up again as supply built back up. And maybe that's where the original miscommunication with Hardware Unboxed came in, especially if their PR rep is from a particular region, which I'm unaware of that myself. So if they're in a region that is maybe particularly affected by this, maybe in that region, they just weren't available at that point, which would also, I think, be consistent with this. Anyway, so Asus is clarifying that, these products do still exist. There will be more of them in the future, but they are absolutely acknowledging that this current supply is bad, and especially in certain markets, you might be out of luck here. They say Asus will continue to support the GeForce RTX 5070 Ti and 5060 Ti 16GB and is working closely with partners to stabilize supply as conditions improve. In other words, what this sounds like to me is that what Asus originally told Hardware Unboxed was basically true. There's not a lot of 5070 Ti available right now, and because of the memory supply issue, so right now they're probably not producing a whole heck of a lot of them. But then the video blew up, and then Nvidia got mad about that word getting out, and so they probably leaned into Asus to make sure that Asus then makes it clear that these products do still exist and are being supplied. But once again, neither Nvidia's statement nor Asus's statement contradicts what the real reports have been, which is just that certain models are getting prioritized because there's not a lot of VRAM to go around, okay? And models that are being deprioritized are the 5070 Ti and 5060 Ti 16GB. And again, Asus pretty much acknowledging that. Okay, so do we have any other additional information? Well, again, Megasize GPU has said that Nvidia GPU supply to AIC, AICs are add-in card partners like Asus, MSI, Gigabyte, etc., has been cut down 15 to 20%, but that the good news is that Nvidia still bundles a GPU with memory. The bad news is that there will be no new product in 2026. I had also reported on this in my previous video, and while I haven't been able to find any additional confirmation of the 15 to 20% number, there has been additional confirmation of NVIDIA is still bundling the GPUs with memory. When Jay's 2 Cents did his further investigation into this video and then clarified it in a new video today, he did say that he heard directly that NVIDIA is still bundling memory with the GPUs, because there had been a lot of reports that that was no longer going to be the case, and that the board's partners would be on their own to try to get memory, which would have been a really big deal, because if that was the case, they have much less bargaining power than Nvidia does, especially the smaller board partners. So that is certainly good news, because Nvidia should be able to push for better memory prices than if the the board partners were left to do it on their own. Now, it's unclear if maybe Nvidia had been considering, leaving the board partners on their own, and then maybe just changed their mind at some point. So it's because a bunch of rumors and leaks came out about that. And at the time, there was no direct denial from Nvidia that I'm aware of. So again, that could have been happening behind the scenes, and then, they decided to still ship the memory with it, and that's the current state of the matter. Now, do we have any additional information on all of this? Well, like I said, WCCF Tech has reached out to a bunch of their sources within AIC partners, people that are close to AIC partners, and people who are close to Nvidia. So again, they're not going to name their sources here, because a lot of this stuff isn't supposed to be made public, and the person making it public can get in trouble. Again, I'm wondering and feeling kind of bad for who Hardware Unboxed's Asus contact was here, because it's possible that they're going to be in some hot water with Nvidia and maybe Asus themselves due to this whole thing clearly not being something that Nvidia was happy with, at least the information that got out there, even if it was maybe mostly true, right? Nvidia certainly wants a different spin on that. But anyway, so coming out of this information, again, their statement they got from Nvidia is the same statement everybody already has, and I already told you that earlier in the video. Now, this is interesting, though. So they're claiming this is from a industry source, but again, they're not naming the specific source. They're saying that Nvidia has actually held off on passing through any memory cost increases at least longer than most companies. And not all of the memory costs increases are being passed through to partners and end users. So again, I have no way of verifying that this is correct, but they're saying that Nvidia is actually taking some hit to their margins by absorbing some of the memory cost increase when they sell the memory off to the AIC partners. Again, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's possible that we could have seen worse prices on Nvidia cards sooner if they hadn't been doing this. But notice they said they held off longer than most companies, so it sounds like they're no longer completely holding off on that, if this source is correct. And they're also saying that some of it is being passed on, not all of it, so maybe there's still some absorption there. Now, my understanding is that Nvidia has some pretty large margins on their graphics cards, so, there's room to take a little bit of a hit there, maybe. But a lot of people were fearful that Nvidia wouldn't take any sort of a hit, since they can make so much profit on all of this if they just sell it onto AI data center. Now, I've seen a lot of people thinking, Nvidia doesn't really want to sell you GPUs anyway. They just want to get you to subscribe to GeForce Now. And I'm sure they'd be happy if you did subscribe to GeForce Now. But I'm not one of the people who think that Nvidia wants to exit the graphics card business, selling them directly to consumers. I think they like having a near monopoly on market share in that space. So I think that considering they're making so much money anyway, right? Most valuable tech company, all of that I think that it is realistic that they don't want things to get completely out of control in the gaming GPU market price-wise, because they'd like to continue to have a near monopoly on that, and they don't really want to cede that over to AMD or Intel. I don't know, because I think they just, why give up John Petty Research has them at like over 90% market share on that. Whether that's correct or not, they certainly have the lion's share. So that's an interesting quote. Another industry source has told WCCF Tech that they're not passing through all memory cost increases to partners, but memory supply is causing constraints. So that's another source seeming to echo the situation, but also this one mentioning that memory supply is causing constraints. which feeds into all of that whole supply issue that we were talking about earlier in the video. Another industry source has told WTF, no, there have been no major changes in how NVIDIA manages memory with its customers. Can't remember if there are any other big quotes. Again, they have the quote from Asus that I already read to you earlier in the video. Anyway, so I have linked this in the video description. I think that's all of their own industry sources. And that's that with the Nvidia GPU situation. Now, since we're at it, I think I'll also mention, I did go around and look to see if we had any statements from AMD regarding their GPUs and prices and availability given the RAM shortage. And the best I found was from Gizmodo, again, sources in the video description, saying AMD promises to try and keep GPU prices low against the ravages of the RAM shortage. Now, what is the actual direct quotes that were given from AMD representatives? I gotta scroll down a ways here, and again, you can read the full article linked in the video description, but the direct quote from AMD is, "We have very strategic partnerships over many, many years with all the DRAM manufacturers to make sure that both the amount of supply that we need and the economics of what we're able to buy from them are what we can support in our graphics business." That was McAfee from AMD, so he's pretty high up there. Now, again, I'm not sure this really means much. They're basically saying, we have a long history with the DRAM partners, etc. None of that says that prices aren't going up, guys. Just saying, okay. Now, we have another statement. This looks like from a Ryzen lead from AMD saying that without the memory at the right price, building graphics cards with our add-in board partner, oh no, sorry, this is from McAfee again. So without the memory at the right price, building graphics cards with our add-in board partners that hit the right price and market, that's tough math to put together. So managing that memory ecosystem very closely is absolutely something that is a core part of what we do. So again, they're acknowledging that this situation is difficult and could cause prices to go up. And they're saying that it's important to manage it. But again, they're in no way stating that like prices aren't going to go up. So there's that. We have some other quotes like, oh, sorry, this is getting into frame generation and all that. So yeah, I think that's really it. So basically, AMD kind of has some statements saying like, we understand this is important. We're doing everything we possibly can, but none of it is saying that on the record that prices aren't going to go up because of low memory supply. Anyway, so this is what I have for you guys in today's video. So we've got the clarification from Hardware Unboxed on the sequence of events that led to them publishing that video and what they said. We have the Asus official statement, which walks back saying that those are end of life, but confirms that they're having supply issues on them. And we have the Nvidia statement, which basically doesn't actually pin them down to mean anything in particular. And then we have those insider sources saying that maybe NVIDIA is actually taking a small hit to their margins to try to keep prices somewhat under control. So, like I said in my video yesterday, I think that given everything that we're hearing, this is still the best way to interpret what's probably going on. Certain models are being prioritized over others, and it's probably the more expensive ones in each memory capacity tier. And that's probably what's really happening. The GPUs may become more available, and it's likely that they are still being produced, just in smaller quantities. I hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.